Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member. This is our elevator panel discussion. My name is Ashley over at Campbell Property Management. For those of you not as familiar with Campbell, we have been in business since 1953, and we do currently manage over 450 community associations from Miami-Dade and now all the way into Central Florida. So we are now servicing Orlando, very excited to be there. We do love to bring education in the form of these webinars. You can always look up our upcoming webinars or look back at our past webinars at campbellevents.org.
I'd like to start by introducing my panelists that are going to be on our discussion today. Steve, why don't we go ahead and get started with you?
Sure, thanks. My name is Steve Braten. I'm with the law firm of Rosenbaum PLLC. I've been practicing law in Florida for about 31 years. We are a full-service community association law firm. And with me today is Katie Phillips, our Director of Education. She'll be monitoring the chat, trying to answer some questions as they come in. And we're really happy to be here today. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you, Steve. I would love to introduce the team over at Southwest Elevators, Brooke and Brandi Cavinder.
Hi, yes, I'm Brooke. I am the sales manager here over the Florida market. So we are in Tampa, South Florida, and Orlando.
And then I'm Brandi. I'm the business development manager of Broward.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. Ty, I'd love to introduce you next. You're muted, Ty.
Literally just said it. No, I did it. My name is Ty Goodman. I'm with Southwest Elevator. I'm the national mod sales manager for Southwest Elevator in all of our markets, all of Texas, Florida, and Las Vegas.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. And my name is Erin Nickerson. I am the Director of Sales for the state of Florida with Unlimited Restoration. We are a licensed general contractor that specializes in fire, water, mold, dead bodies, all the bad things that happen to your property on the interior. We go ahead and fix that. And this is a webinar that is near and dear to my heart. My biggest fear is getting trapped in an elevator, and the amount of elevators that I see that are not being properly maintained while I'm in and out of buildings, that the elevator tag is expired, and these girls showed me all these signs and symptoms to look for. So I'm really happy to be here with you all today. So let's jump right in. Brandi, can you tell us some basic differences between hydraulic elevators for our lower rise buildings and traction elevators for our high rise buildings?
Yes, so I'm going to start with just the basic differences. We'll start with hydros. So hydraulic elevators work with a piston and fluid system, which moves the car up. You'll see these more commonly in lower story buildings, usually around 5 to 6 stories, but we do sometimes see them even in the 7 and 8 stories, just not as common. They are simpler mechanically, usually way lower in cost, and they don't require a big overhead machine room like the tractions do. And then I know you mentioned maintenance, so I'm just going to touch on maintenance for hydro units. I know we'll talk about it further on in this webinar, but just a few things. The most important part of maintenance on these is obviously safety checks. Oil levels is very important, as well as the cylinder and piston conditions, door operations, and just making sure there's no leaks of that hydraulic fluid. It's really about catching the small issues early so that we can, as elevator providers, prevent shutdowns and keep the ride smooth. Now with traction elevators, you'll see these in the taller and more high-rise buildings. And instead of a piston and fluids, they use either ropes or belts in a counterweight system that makes them much faster and more efficient than the hydros. Obviously, if you think you're traveling a much higher distance, you want something more efficient and quicker to get you up 20, even 40 stories. But these are designed to handle higher travel distances and heavier traffic and traffic flow. They require more space for the equipment because there is more equipment with traction. So you'll usually see these machine rooms on the roofs of buildings, or there's obviously, more higher tech where they're machine room-less and everything's on the insides of the panels. But maintenance for these focuses on the ropes and belts, the shivs and the brakes, which is very important. But these items, it's important to make sure they're all properly aligned, tensioned, and to always note the wear and tear of those particular equipment components. We also focus on checking the controller, safety circuits, and the door systems. Those three items are usually the most common trouble spots with traction elevators. But again, the main focus is safety and ensuring smooth travel. But just to recap, the similarities are really at the core of it. You want your provider to make sure that the safety system, doors, and ride quality are safe and reliable. Obviously, the equipment differs between, but the goal is a smooth and dependable ride. But between tractions and hydros, the main difference is the equipment. The hydros are great and a little more cost effective in those short travel, smaller buildings. And then the traction systems are obviously more favorable in the higher and taller structures for speed and efficiency.
Thanks, Brandi. So the elevator is part of the overall operation system in a building, and that includes safety, which you kept talking about. There's some new requirements for elevators that were passed. Steve, can you tell us a little bit about the new legal requirements?
Sure. So first of all, by way of background, the Division of Hotels and Restaurants Bureau of Elevator Safety is the state governmental agency that oversees elevator safety compliance in the state of Florida. And typically the division relies upon ASME safety standards, which is the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. That organization is what I would say is considered the gold standard on elevator safety. So the state has adopted from ASME some safety code requirements. So in the 2019 safety code, door lock monitoring or DLM is required. They pushed the date back for that from December of 23 to bring your elevators into compliance. It should have been by August 1 of 2025. So that applies to all existing automatic passenger elevators. And then with regard to emergency brakes, that standard is now going to be enforced as of August 1, 2028. It's a mandatory second braking system to prevent unintended car movement, and that applies to all traction elevators. Also, with the third, I think, significant piece everybody needs to be aware of is two-way communication and video. This mandates two-way text-based communication and video capability for emergency calls, and that's going to apply to any new construction. And if you do a full modernization of your elevator, beginning, so that went into effect for new and modernizations January 1 of 2024, and will apply to any ongoing modernization projects that associations may have. With regard to the DLM, depending on how old your elevator car is going to impact what you may require in terms of whether it's new components or simply software upgrades, which I'm sure the Southwest team can get into a little bit more detail about, because I know enough to be dangerous. And then, of course, I'm sure they can also speak to, the longer you wait to do these things, the more costly they can become. So.
Thank you, Steve. That was a lot of information. We are going to be giving you this outline that we're working off of with all of the state statutes that you need to be in compliance with after this webinar today. But Brooke, maybe you could tell us what this entails from your company's perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start with door lock monitoring because that is probably the most recent. And if you don't have it, you definitely need it because, like Steve said, it went into effect August 1. So we're seeing some people that did not have it, some customers, and they're now doing their annuals, and it is getting written up and dinged on all inspection reports now. So you will not get your new certificates if you do not have that system in place. So door lock monitoring, if your equipment, they say, is 2007 or older, it probably doesn't have it. Anything 2007, 2008 probably does have it. Again, that still needs to be tested because there's so many different types of controllers, and just because your system may have it doesn't mean that it's turned on. still may need to be programmed. It may just need to be turned on in this system. So anything 2007 or older is usually when they say you will need it. It's not a big, long, crazy repair. It takes about 2 days to get it fully installed, wired, and inspected. Price for that can be anywhere from 11 to 14 grand, depending on your current system you have. But we definitely, if you don't have that, or you don't know if you have that, I would ask your elevator company to check that, because if you do not have your new certificates, it will definitely get written up and you can get fined for it on your new annuals. Going on to the secondary brake system. So that's going to be just like DLM. Any traction in the state of Florida will have to have a rope gripper. There's a few different options, but normally you'll see a rope gripper added on to your traction equipment, which is a secondary brake. This code essentially is going to put it into kind of easier terms, any motion that's not supposed to happen in the elevator, it's going to stop that. So it's essentially like a secondary brake. That's going to be a way bigger cost. And that will be going into effect August 1, 2028. So I like to kind of tell our clients now, if you have older equipment and you're planning to modernize, it's going to be a lot more cost efficient to modernize your elevator in the next 3 years, if you're already planning on that, than to add on a rope gripper to an old piece of equipment. So definitely something to look into with capital planning. Adding a rope gripper on to your current equipment can cost anywhere from that $40,000 to $50,000 range. So definitely something to look into with modernization, because the new modernizations will obviously come with that. And then thirdly, like Steve said, the two-way communication, that's not something you have to add on to your current equipment unless you're modernizing or new construction. But I say that lightly because there has been talks within the Florida division here, elevator division, that they might make that retroactive where everyone will have to have it. So they do like to do that with codes. I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing that has to be inputted into every single system. But again, that's with new modernizations. Your companies, if you're doing a modernization, should already have that quoted in, because they have to do that new two-way communication, which is essentially video now is going to be in elevators. It's in the COP, something small. It's for someone that may be visually impaired or deaf. They have now a camera in there to kind of help with that. And there's different signals and whatnot for those incidents, if there was an entrapment, and obviously safety reasons if anything were to happen to the elevator. But those are kind of the three main codes in Florida that are either here or coming down the road. And they are obviously, like I mentioned, they're not, super cheap upgrades. So definitely something to start looking for your capital planning. And yeah.
Thanks, Brooke. I want to go back to general maintenance because you touched on my favorite subject, which is preventative maintenance and general maintenance. Because if we're preventing these larger issues from occurring by doing the general regular maintenance on our elevator, our costs are going to stay lower long term and our components should last longer, right? So maybe you can elaborate on a few frequently asked questions about elevators and how often they need maintenance on certain components, and are there different types of maintenance?
Yeah, definitely. So here at Southwest, we really harp on monthly maintenance. Obviously in South Florida in general, a lot of commercial buildings, a lot of condos, lots of people in and out using the pieces of equipment daily, hourly, even by the minute. So we harp on monthly maintenance. And what that means is that monthly a technician should come in and touch every major component of the equipment, which Brandi kind of touched on. So for hydros, obviously a little bit less. They need to look at the piston, the packing, the controller, the pump, motor, things of that nature. With the traction cars, there's a lot more components to it. So you have the motor, you have the shivs, you have the ropes. So hitting each one of those components, lubricating, making the necessary adjustments. Big things with doors, as we see, that's like 90% of the callbacks we see is Gibbs or, the door operator, whatnot. So making adjustments, lubricating everything so it's running smoothly is kind of how we structure our maintenance plan. And obviously Florida has MCPs, maintenance control plans, that your provider should be hitting each month and looking at those components to obviously help the longevity of the equipment. If you're not seeing your provider on a monthly maintenance visits, and you're only seeing them when you place a call, that's 100% an issue, and you're 100% not going to get the full lifespan out of the equipment, especially with the newer equipment that's being installed. the lifespan on some of the equipment we're seeing through some of the proprietary equipment is lasting like 8 to 10 years, where it used to last 20, 25 years. So if you're not getting maintenance on that newer equipment, you're already getting kind of screwed because of the new equipment that's being installed. Then you're not getting the maintenance. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. So monthly maintenance is something we push. It's kind of like the old school way, but that is what we have seen to work the best. I don't know, Ty, if you want to touch on that anymore.
Sure. When it comes to actually the frequency, just like Brooke and Brandi have both said, it's going to be based on your unit, your rise, the age, the usage. There's a lot of factors that go into as far as the frequency goes on your elevator. You need to do it's called preventative maintenance for one reason and one reason alone. It tries to prevent any problems that you may have or anything that might occur with the elevator. It is a mechanical piece of equipment. Things do happen, problems do arise, stuff like that. But with preventative maintenance, you're going to make sure that a lot of the things are going to shut down or things that are going to tear up or things that need attention, you get the opportunity to do that before the problem happens. Like both of them said, you need to check your doors. Your doors are 2 to 1. Every one movement of the elevator, your doors are going to operate twice. Doors are the most important thing. You must go over the hanger rollers, the pickup rollers, all the stuff on the inside that the public usually doesn't see. Those are the type things that we take care of and make sure that they're operating properly. When it comes to tractions with the machine, you have your shiv, which turns. You have your ropes, which move the car up and down. You have a governor, which is a distance and a speed feedback to the controller. There's a lot of stuff that you need to take care of, and that's why when it comes to preventative maintenance, you have to take care of those things. It's no different than if you never change the oil in your car, the life expectancy of your motor is not going to last. Elevators are the same way. You have to take care of them on a monthly basis to make sure that the things that are going to go wrong, you're able to catch them before they do go wrong.
You keep bringing up this subject that I want to keep harping on, Ty. So from my perspective, when I'm in a condominium building, a vertical building, whether it's a mid-rise, a high-rise, low-rise, and there's water damage in the building, my number one recommendation for any time any component of the elevator has a leak, flood, water touches it, is to have your elevator company come out and look at what has been touched by that water. A lot of times I see properties, especially that experience large scale damage. And I can think of one property in particular, Steve, that we worked on during the hurricane last year, that their elevator company couldn't get out for 3 weeks. So they were literally in an 8-story building without elevators for 3 weeks. And my team's going up and down and they're incurring my labor rates because their elevator company violated their contract. But Ty, what is your perspective when there's a leak or a flood in a building? What do you guys certify anything? Do you want to look at all the components that the water touch? What does that look like for you?
Well, the first thing you have to worry about or remember is elevators and water do not mix. They are not friends at all, because 90% of the stuff we deal with is electrical. And the first thing that happens, of course, in a hurricane, you're probably going to lose power. The biggest thing that most property owners need to, or property managers need to know, or building personnel, if you do have any type of leak, and we've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times, especially in residential, when they'll blow a water line or a sprinkler line or something like that, the first thing you want to do is get the elevator above the entry of water. So if you have a 10-story building and you blow a water line or a sprinkler line or something like that on the 3rd floor, get the elevator to the 4th floor and shut it off. Kill the power best you can, either at the main breaker downstairs or at the breaker or the disconnect in the machine room. That way you take a chance on saving some things, and you won't allow that water and electricity to go through and start blowing boards and doing things like that. Second thing is you want to rely on your elevator company to make sure that before any power is applied back to that elevator, they are on site. And if the elevator company is not responsible enough to get out there as soon as they can, I hate to say it, you need to find another elevator company, because
Agreed.
in situations like that, one of the processes that Southwest has is, especially in the state of Florida, our markets in Texas along the coast, we have a process of preparation just like everybody else does. You'll see people that'll, you start putting sandbags down, people will start moving their furniture off their balconies. We also have a process where we have guys available if we need to put them in a spot to where they can easily walk to a building. Whatever we need to do, we try to take care of our customers, because the worst thing you can have is, like the example you gave, 3 weeks of not having an elevator. You have medical emergencies, you have handicap, you have people that need to get to a doctor, whatever you need to be. We have a certain hurricane process that we like to take care of, and we get our guys in a position to where they need to be so the public can, as long as it's safe, number one, to turn the elevator back on.
Right.
And most elevators in the state of Florida and along the coast of Texas, where hurricanes are prevalent, they have a backup generator, and your backup generator is going to kick on, supply power to the building. Most buildings that have the state of Florida requires anything over 90 feet to have a backup power device, such as a generator, something along those lines, to where they can at least have one elevator running in the building. So that way, if they do have a medical emergency, a fire, anything like that, they have the availability to use that elevator to get to whatever floor that they need to get to. Again, as long as it's safe, there's no water penetration into the hoistway or anywhere around the elevator, and somebody has checked it out to make sure that it is possible for us to move the elevator. So in situations like that, you have to be prepared. And that's one thing we pride ourselves on, is our process of preparation when it comes to taking care of our customers in situations like that.
Thank you, Ty.
And Erin,
Now,
just if I can jump in real quick, I think the scenario that you gave as an example, it's also important for our clients to know what insurance policies cover that equipment, so that if there is a loss like you described, and you have a water scenario that causes electrical damage, that those elevators are covered, because those repairs are going to be very expensive.
Yeah.
absolutely. And if you guys need help with looking in your policy and seeing if you have coverage, I would be happy to take a look at that for you. One thing, and Steve knows I nerd out when it comes to legal and to insurance, and elevators for me in my world are always the biggest pain point after an emergency, and getting access, getting them back up and running. They're also one of the most costly components. Now, these ladies have trained me so well that now I can't even walk into an elevator and not look at the licensing and renewal. It's like the biggest pet peeve when I'm like, oh, it's August 1st and this isn't renewed. So, Steve, the DBPR regulates elevators from the standpoint of an annual licensing and renewal. What can happen if a building fails to renew their elevator certificate?
Yeah, they're going to get issued a notice, and they're likely to get fined, and the fining can, gradually increase if they don't bring that elevator, if the property doesn't bring the elevator into compliance by the deadlines. And they don't, because we're dealing with safety issues, there's not a lot of room here for, extensions or pushing it back, or, it's much better to be proactive and not find yourself in that situation, because once you're on the radar, you kind of stay on the radar for a while. So because that inspector is going to be coming back and checking that property more frequently than he or she might otherwise, from what I hear from clients.
Now, my next one's for you, Brooke. Is this something that the elevator company under contract should be doing, or is an independent inspection required?
So, it's both. So for annual inspections, all hydros and tractions have to go through an annual inspection each year. That consists of your elevator mechanic and a third-party inspection company. There's lots out there, but there is elevator mechanic and a third-party inspector that will do the annual inspection each year. They go through, they test all the safeties, all the components of the elevators. The inspector literally tests everything on your system. So from there, if the inspection passes, no violations, the inspection company, not your elevator company, the third-party inspector sends that inspection report into the state. This is where people get confused, Erin, and I like that you brought up the certificate. So I get this question all the time. They'll be like, my inspection was clear, but the certificate's not coming. You have to pay like the customer has to pay an annual county fee each year. If they don't pay that county fee each year, you won't get your certificate. So that's where the holdup is a lot. So Miami-Dade, Miami Beach, West Palm, Broward, they each have their own county website that you pay. It's, you know, about $100 per elevator in renewal fees a year. So once your inspection is cleared, if your renewal fee to the county, which has to be paid by the building, is cleared, that's when you will get your new certificate sent directly to you from the state. Now, if you don't pass your inspection, that's when it gets into, is it stuff that the elevator company needs to correct, or is it the building's responsibility? We see tons of times where it's like the AC is not working, the machine room door, that's all building responsibility. Once all those violations are cleared, then you have to call a re-inspection. Same thing, if you pass that re-inspection, your renewal fees paid, you'll get your certificates. So a big thing to check. I see a ton of times with my clients, their previous companies did not tell them about the renewal fee. You should either get it in the mail, but I feel like a lot of times maybe it gets looked past. There's a county website for each county. You go on and pay your elevator renewal fee, and that's how you get your certificate. And there's buildings out there that haven't paid it in 6-7 years, and that's why their certificates say 2021. They have their inspections, but you know, they never paid the renewal fee. So that is a big thing to look for.
Sounds like they need a new manager too.
Yeah, that as well.
Steve, I hate to make a joke, but for our condos and co-ops, obviously elevator replacement should be a reserve line item. But what about modernization and major repairs?
Yeah, no, I think that also falls into the category of a reserve item. The laws were recently amended in July that anything that costs $25,000 or more would fall into the category of reserve. So certainly a modernization is going to be fall into that category, and understanding your remaining useful life of that elevator, and properly capital budgeting for that is critical. Otherwise, you're going to be levying a special assessment to cover those expenses down the road.
Well, you brought up modernization. Now I have a lot of questions. My first one's going to be for Ty. Ty, can you walk us through what the modernization process looks like mechanically as well as aesthetically?
Sure. The first thing is when it comes to a modernization, it's one of the largest undertakings that most buildings go through, whether it be residential, commercial, hospitality, hospital. It's unfortunately it can be kind of intrusive, especially if you only have 2 elevators. You only have one working for the public while you have the other ones under the modernization process. But as far as your elevator contractor goes, we have a lot of things in place that can give you a little bit of kind of bring you to ease when it comes to the process as far as the modernization goes. The first thing we do is every contract that we sign, every project that we take on, you're given a project manager, and this project manager is going to be your best friend. They help you out with all the first phase of it, as far as contract negotiations, your down payment, all your submittals such as fixtures, controller type, cab interior selection, if that's what you choose to do. Your project manager is going to be your best friend, and they're your go-to because they're the ones that are in charge of your job. You have your operational side with your superintendents and your mechanics on site, but your project manager is the one that is going to give you the warm and fuzzies when it comes to such an undertaking in your building. First thing you're going to do is a selection process. We go through it. We're with you, beside you, step by step. When it comes to your fixtures, your controller, new machines, retaining the machines, new pumping units for a hydro. We also help you out with your building needs. One of the biggest things that you have to in a modernization when it comes to that is once you touch the controller, you have to bring the building up to code. And most of the time when you do a modernization, your building is not up to code. You have to worry about your fire service, your emergency power, your electrical, your mechanical, your HVAC. We have companies that we partner with in all of our markets that's all they do is the work by others part of the elevator modernization. They're not, some fly-by-night company, or they say, yeah, we can handle it. We only partner with companies that they specialize in the work by others for the modernization. And it helps the building out because they can come in and say, okay, this is what you have to do. You only have primary and alternate recall. Now you have to add flashing hat. We have a company that can do that. All of those small little things like that, of course, they go through your project manager and through your operations department, but all of those things can help you. Again, building needs, any type of anything that the building needs when it comes to that. And of course, all the stuff on the elevator. Preparation. At Southwest, we have what's called a kickoff meeting where we do two of them, one 30 days before the project starts and about a week before the project starts, where we come sit down with you and we review everything that we're going to be taking care of, from the controller to the machine on a traction, the pumping unit on a hydro, your fixtures, again, cab interiors, cab flooring, all of that kind of stuff. We do a kickoff meeting to make sure that everything is set up. We also like to, the week or a week or two before we actually mobilize to the project, we'll have another one to where it says, okay, where do we park? What bathrooms do we use? Where's our storage? How do we enter and access the building? Is there any security? Do we need to sign in every day? We try to cover every single aspect of this, of anything that might arise, especially when we mobilize to the site. And if you have a high-rise building and we need to crane, all of this stuff is already in place. It's a quick review. We give a little bit of, at ease to the customer, again, because it is one of the largest undertakings that you're going to go through. We also discussed downtime as far as how long it's going to take for the modernization to happen. That's the time frame that the car is going to be out of service. We set a date. This is going to be the date we're going to finish. This is the date of your inspection. This is the date of turnover. After all that, just like Brooke said, you have your inspection. A modernization inspection is kind of the same as your regular inspections, but it takes an annual inspection and a 5-year inspection and combines them. So you do both at the same time. So your annual inspection is going to be covered for 1 year, and the alteration inspection from a modernization is like the 5-year inspection that you have to have on tractions. It'll cover you for the next 5 years until that 5-year test it comes due. And then you have turnover. We have a couple of processes when it comes to turnover. We like to run the cars on ghost mode. That's where we run for 2 days. The elevator runs nonstop. The doors are operating. Of course, the lights are off and we have barricades so nobody can enter the elevator, but it runs from floor to floor to floor to make sure that before we turn it over, if there's any hiccups, kinks, anything like that we need to work out, we have the opportunity to check those faults and get them squared away. Then we also bring our service department in, and our service adjuster and our service manager or service superintendent, they go over the elevator to make sure that we've done everything according to scope and that everything that they're ready to take on from a service perspective, that they're ready to handle that. And then the last thing we do is customer acceptance. We take the scope of work that we were contracted to do, and we walk the building with the customer to make sure, and we actually check everything off, whether it be their cab interior selection is a mauve panel, to make sure that's done. We show them the machine room, the new controller, the new mobilization unit, everything like that. We will not turn that elevator over to the public or back to the customer until the customer signs off on it on our customer acceptance form. So I know that was a lot and it was kind of combined into one, but it's a process that most buildings, when they go through it, when they're done, they're like, whew, I'm glad that's done. But we try to make it as easy as we possibly can.
That was really thorough. Thank you. So Steve, the condo and co-op laws were changed to require certain safety upgrades, such as the fire safety system and sprinklers. Does this also encompass the elevator system?
So with regard to the statutes themselves, like when you're referring to emergency life safety systems, I don't believe those cover the elevators directly. I think it's more of the Florida Administrative Code and what we've been talking about today in terms of these mandatory, code upgrades, like with the door lock mechanism. Those are not in the actual statute themselves.
Thank you. Ty, I do have one more question for you, just because I'm afraid of getting trapped in an elevator. What do I do if that does happen?
All right. Well, first and foremost, if you are trapped in the elevator and the elevator's not moving, that's probably the safest place to be on the planet because you're inside a metal box. But first thing is don't panic. Um, Make sure everybody, if you're in there by yourself or anybody else, make sure everybody's okay. Everybody remains calm. Um, Elevator code requires two immediate types of um, announcement that there's a problem. You have what's called an alarm bell. You have a button on your COP that it'll either ring a bell. Some manufacturers have it as a whistle. Some people they call it a bird tweet, stuff like that. That's going to make an audible sound to let people know, hey, something's wrong, and they have to be loud enough to where they have to reach at least 50 feet. So the alarm bell is pretty loud. Like I said, any type of audible noise that lets somebody know that there is a problem. Second thing is every elevator has to have a telephone in it. And so the newer codes that came out, a lot of people when they have older ones, they actually have a handset that you have to pick up and you have to press and hold it. Newer code requires for a push button auto dialer to where all you have to do is push a button. It illuminates when the call is placed and it'll flash whenever the call is answered. And then you can speak to somebody on the other line and say, hello, my name is Ty. I think I'm on the third floor. The elevator's not moving. I'm pressing all the buttons and stuff like that. The person on the other end will tell you to be patient. Somebody's being dispatched. And the way that we operate when it comes to an entrapment, we use GPS on all of our technicians' phones. If you're in a certain person's route or your route mechanic is farther away than somebody on another route, we dispatch the closest person to that unit to make sure they get there as quickly as they can. Because unfortunately, everybody's seen the movies, everybody's seen what happened. A lot of 99% of that stuff doesn't happen, but you still get it is uneasy being trapped inside an elevator because you are inside of a metal box. But again, be patient, do what you need to do, make sure that you are safe, you are comfortable, and then wait for somebody to come get you out. But one thing I will say to piggyback a little bit on what Brooke says, the new code for the three-way communication, um, it has closed captioning on it, and you have to have somebody on the other end that also has the computer screen to where they can actually see the person inside the elevator. And it'll be like, are you okay? Press door open for yes, door closed for no. And what it does, it gives a little bit more relatability, or it makes the rider or the person that's trapped feel a little bit more comfortable because they can actually see somebody on the other end and they can actually answer questions and stuff like that. So with newer codes like that, you have to have that in there, and that is all checked on your alteration inspection once you do your modernization.
Thank you, Ty. That makes me feel a lot better. So new elevators are where I want to be. I do want to talk about my favorite subject because all of us experienced that. We're in it in hurricane season, and there is a specific protocol for elevators during an evacuation and once there's a storm warning. And I think that as property managers on this call, as board members, and just people living in community associations, when a hurricane is approaching, the elevator being one of the most costly expenses that you can have if it goes down, if water damages it, it's important that you understand that locking out and tagging out your elevator should be a must for your community if you are near the ocean, if you could experience floodwaters. Steve and I could talk about our favorite client on the west coast of Florida that did not lock and tag out their elevators and experienced two hurricanes back to back with floodwaters, and now they completely have to redo their brand new modernized elevator. So it's important that you do take the time and tag out and explain to the community that the elevators will be inoperable. You will have to use the staircase. If you have animals on upper floors, you may want to evacuate because it's not going to be a comfortable situation to go walk your dog up and down the stairs. From a elevator standpoint, ladies, I don't know if you have some general where should they place their elevators, traction versus hydraulic when it comes to storm preparedness?
Normally we say like our little our hurricane prep checklist says to put them at the top of the hoistway and turn the power off is normally the best.
Thank you, Brooke. And What should an association do if they don't have a sump pump in their elevator pit and they experience water damage in the pit?
I'm gonna let you talk on that one.
Okay, the biggest thing is if there is a hurricane approaching and, of course, being in Florida, we've all seen the king tide. We've all seen how that'll affect the streets and how that affects elevators. Underneath every elevator, you have what's called the elevator pit. That's where a lot of equipment is stored. If you at any point in time have water an inch above the bottom floor, even in the hallways, do not run the elevator. On a hydraulic system, you have your jack, which is posted down, which, there's different applications for that. But you can get water into your oil, which can cause rust for your piston, for your jack, and then you have to spend the money to replace your jack. When it comes to a traction car, you do have rotating devices down in the pit that can move the water up to the top. So my first advice is if you do not have to move them, don't until the elevator company comes out and checks. Make sure that the water level is not, that there's no water in the pit to where you can safely move it. If you have to move it, again, make sure somebody from your elevator company is there. One thing that Florida has enacted is they have what they call a pit flood alarm. It's a device that we mount into the elevator pit that if you have it on a modernization with the newer microprocess controller, it will, once that alarm goes off or that float switch trips, it'll actually move your elevator to the second floor and shut it off until the water recedes. So you cannot move that elevator because the controller actually has it shut down. You can't
I love
bypass
that.
it or anything like that. You have to leave it there. But again, just to recap, first thing is if you have any water down on the first floor, it's in the pit, try not to move the elevator because you could cause a lot more damage than it would be if you didn't run it. But as far as having a sump pump, it's a good thing to have because there's codes on how much the sump pump has to move water, how much water it has to move per minute. So it does help you out in those situations.
One of the biggest mistakes I also have seen in recent hurricane years associations make is pumping out their own water with their own sump pump. If you have a hydraulic elevator, that water that's in your pit is mixed with hydraulic oil. And if you get caught putting that water outside, you can incur massive, massive fines. We had a building in downtown West Palm Beach that did that, and the city was not happy with them. And their attorney got to deal with it. Speaking of attorneys, I do have a question in our chat that I do want to address while we're on the subject of hurricanes for you, Steve. During a
Sure.
hurricane, mandatory evacuation of a condo, if the board or management company locked up an elevator and a homeowner took it down during the hurricane and water damage occurred, who's responsible?
Yeah, in that scenario, I would think the homeowner would be negligent for reactivating assuming they could even accomplish that. Yeah, I think that the owner would be responsible, especially when there's been an evacuation order and the owner elected to stay.
And I believe in scare tactics, and I know you and I are on the same page with this, Steve. If you're on
Yeah.
a barrier island and you have people that are staying and not evacuating, and it's a mandatory evacuation, if I were the property manager or board, I would ask them for their next of kin because we are not coming. The emergency services people are not coming. What if you have a heart attack? What if all the windows in the building get blown out? There is nobody coming to rescue you. And I think that once you scare them into that submission, it's serious. A category 5 storm is serious. You can Google one of my favorite board members of all time being airlifted off of a building in Fort Myers Beach. You don't want to be that person. That airlift is very expensive.
Yeah, most people forget Hurricane Andrew, and a lot of people stayed, and a lot of dead bodies got moved out of there because of that. So
It's really sad. I do want to roll back to you again, Steve, on some ADA rules. We
sure.
hear the ADA rules for many other common areas on property. Are there any specifics for elevator and the use of elevators?
So, no, that's a great question, Aaron. So the ADA typically gets confused with the Fair Housing Act. And so, when we're talking about our residential communities, we're more often than not talking about the Fair Housing Act as opposed to the ADA. When it comes to the ADA, there's certain, disability standards that have to be complied with. I think with elevators, I mean, this goes back to the 80s where elevators had to be wide enough in order to accommodate a wheelchair and for somebody in a wheelchair to be able to turn that wheelchair around. So the cab had to be wide enough to accommodate that. But really, when we're talking about, possible accommodations, I think it's more in a situation where we have a maintenance failure and the elevator is down. It's the only elevator for the building. And then you have, disabled residents who can't get up and down the building. What happens in that situation? And I think if that does happen, then you need to be calling your association attorney because there may be alternative accommodations that the association has to pay for. There could be some, depending on why the elevator is down, there could be some contractual issues there. So it can get pretty complicated. So if now on the other hand, if you're taking an elevator down for maintenance and hopefully you have another elevator available to the owners, I think the more notice you give, the better, being proactive and letting owners know that there's going to be an inconvenience, even if they don't like it, it allows them to, plan in advance I've seen that typically in high-rise buildings.
Thank you, Steve. I want to kind of circle back around to preventative maintenance from our elevator team. There's a lot of questions in the chat regarding the importance of good air conditioning units in elevator motor rooms where elevator computers are located. Is that necessary? Is there a requirement for that or a best practice?
Yeah, I can quickly touch on it. It is a code requirement, so there's no way around that, to be honest. And with the obviously heat and humidity we have here in Florida, it is very important to keep those machine rooms cool. If an AC breaks or AC is not working, we've seen boards blow up, we've seen boards stop working. The humidity and the condensation in the room causes water damage to the board. So it is very important, and it's a lot cheaper to keep an AC in the room than to replace those boards if you don't have an AC in the room. So Ty, you can touch a little bit more on that, but it is definitely necessary and it is a code requirement.
Yeah, just like Brooke said, it is a code requirement, but a lot of the newer controllers since about 2016, they have a built-in internal thermometer. And it's almost like when you use your laptop and you hear that little internal fan kick on. Elevator controllers have the same thing, be it hydraulic or be it traction controller, that they'll actually, it's not an adjustable parameter, but it's actually a thermometer inside there that will actually, once it reaches to a certain degree in that machine room, it will actually turn the elevator off. It will shut the elevator down with the doors open, and it will not run until the temperature drops down to where it's tolerable for those microprocessing or computer boards to operate without fear. It's a built-in safety device. So yes, air conditioners are very important. They're not just because they want to keep the room cool for somebody to go in there and sit down. It protects your elevator equipment and it keeps it in running. It keeps it in good condition for a long time.
Since we're on the subject of ACs in elevator rooms, let's shift to the elevator cab now. In a full modernization of a 50-year-old building with only 3 stories, do we really need to add AC? We got an informal quote that added AC, which was about $50,000 to the project on top of everything else. This person wants to know, is there a way that adding AC can be skipped?
No, it can't because it's a code requirement. But the only time that you have to add an air conditioner to it is, like I said earlier, if you modernize the elevator. Once you touch the controller, everything, including the elevator and the building, has to be brought up to current code. So if you have an elevator that's 50 years old and is 3 stories, code does not state that you have to add an air conditioner. It's only if you modernize or change the mode of conveyance for that elevator, which is the controller.
Thank you. Now I want to kind of go back to what we were talking about before, service from an elevator contractor. Is the vendor legally required to fill out the logbook each time they come for maintenance or service?
Brooke, you want this one or you want me to take
Yeah,
it?
you can take it. Go ahead. Here,
Okay.
you're ready.
Yeah, part of the MCP or the maintenance control plan that is required by code to be in the machine room, you have a check chart or what we call check charts, but it's a list of everything that we do based on the month. It has to be filled out. Everything that we do for maintenance is on that check chart, including checking phase one and phase two. Excuse me, including checking phase one and phase two of your elevator. That is not your building alarm. That is the actual fire service on the elevator. It also has a spot for you to put where you've done your annual test or your 5-year test if it's a traction. And yes, they are required to be filled out. If your elevator company is not filling them out, they need to go back and fill them out. And uh, it gives the customer and the inspector the clarification and the certification that the elevator company has been doing their job by coming out and doing maintenance. And Steve, you might want to touch on this one. In the case of an injury on an elevator, they will come out and get the check chart and make sure that the elevator company has been doing their job and based on what code requires for maintenance on an elevator.
Yeah, I would agree. The first thing a personal injury attorney is going to look for is whether the elevator has been routinely maintained or if not, and that's going to be best evidenced by that logbook for sure.
And they should immediately pick up the phone and call you.
That would be a good start. Yeah.
I mean, your attorney needs to know if somebody got hurt, regardless of where it's at on your property, whether it's an elevator, a slip and fall, attorney needs to be involved.
Sure.
Let's go to a few more of these questions. Just so you know, guys, in the chat too, if you're asking about quotes specifically for your property or pricing, Brandi and Brooke are going to reach out to you directly to provide that to you. There's a few in here that have been asking, ladies, and we'll get those over to you. I've asked that anybody that would like that, just put into the chat what association you belong to and the best contact method. I guess this is for the ladies again. What happens if an elevator fails an inspection, and how long do you have to cure those issues?
So you have 90 days to cure the violations, but I say that lightly as well because if you're in so the certificate in your elevator, going back to that, if it says August 1, that doesn't mean that was when your last annual is done. So the counties, I think Broward sends out all their certificates 8/1 of every year. August 1st of every year, you get your certificates. That doesn't mean that your annual is due 8/1. So let's say your annual is due in October and you don't do your annual to October. Well, now you're past, your annual. So you don't really have 90 days to get it done. You really want to do your annual probably about, I would suggest 2 to 3 months before your annual is due. Most of the time there's violations, to be completely transparent. So that gives your elevator company, 60 days to cure those violations and actually get you back up to, your annual on that date. So, that's kind of how that goes.
So do your annual before 8/1. We all just learned it.
We'll do your annual before your last annual was done. Yes, correct.
Thank you. Again, we're going back to code. According to Florida Elevator Code, is it legal to replace a hydraulic elevator jack while reusing the existing piston? If it's legal, is it advisable? That's probably a tie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ty.
I'll jump on. All right. When it comes to replacing your hydraulic jack, a jack consists of two different parts. It includes the casing, which is the outside, and the piston, which actually moves the elevator up and down. You can replace the piston, and then leave the casing or the housing for the jack there, as long as you use the same manufacturer. If they still produce the jack, and then you can go in and you can replace the piston. But you can't really replace the casing and retain the piston. And why I say that is because a lot of times if you have issues with the casing, like lightning hit it, or your piston was installed, or your jack was installed before 1982, that's what they call a single bottom jack. They changed the code in 1982 to make every jack have 2 layers at the bottom for protection, to where if lightning ever hit the ground or compression, because there's a lot of pressure in that elevator jack to push that, to push that car up and down, or the elevator up and down. So you can replace the piston and retain the casing, but you can't really retain the piston and change the casing. I hope I answered or understood that and answered it correctly.
I think I understand her a little better now, Ty. Thank you. I guess I'm gonna go to this one for you, Steve. This is probably a combination of you and Ty having if the elevator mechanically fails, who is liable? Is it the elevator company, the HOA condo, or a combination of both?
Well, I mean, I think it's, cause and effect. Why did it fail? I think it's going to have to be assessed. Chances are you're going to have somebody come out and do an independent assessment of the elevator to figure out why was the mechanical failure and whether the company that was maintaining it for you was doing it in accordance with the terms of the contract. But certainly love to hear the team's thoughts on that.
From what I've seen in a lot of condominium buildings, especially my older communities that maybe are self-managed, portfolio managed, have had inconsistency in management staff, neglect in their elevators comes into play. I
Mhm.
would want, no matter what, if an elevator failed and there was an injury that was caused, I would consult with my association attorney and have a third party inspector come out that is not my elevator company to perform an inspection, who's not related to the building at all. That way you have an unbiased opinion that your attorney can then work off of.
Right.
That would be where I would start and where I've seen, especially after hurricane damage happens, having a third party come out and really assess that's unbiased would be what I'd want to see. What do you think, Ty?
Yes, that gets tough. You want somebody that's qualified, licensed to take care of your elevator. There's a lot of gray area when it comes to that, as far as even down to, building personnel having elevator door keys and stuff like that. You have to, like you said, it's going to fall back on the management company first and foremost. They need to have a qualified elevator company come take care of their elevators at all times. Don't try to do it yourself. Don't try to, handle it in-house or anything like that, because not only is it unsafe, but you can also create more problems than you'll solve by trying to save that kind of money.
I have a question for you, Ty,
Sure.
and maybe Steve, you want to chime in too.
Sure.
Is there a real difference in using a union elevator company versus non-union?
In my opinion, yes. And here's the reason why I'll say that. We are a signatory company. We employ IUEC, the International Union of Elevator Constructors. We employ union members as our field techs. And all of our field guys they have to be union members of the local union where you're at. And the one difference I think that stands apart from a union to a non-union, mainly is education. In the union, you have to go through what's called NEEP. It's their national training program. You are an apprentice. You start out as an apprentice, and then you take classes. You have to go to school once a week, and you have to do that for 4 years. And in order to advance every year, you have to take tests, or you have to what they call testing out. And once you test out, you're able to move to the next section or anything like that. It's mainly based on a year. So they have it designed to where for the entire year, you're going to test on things that you're going to experience in the field. Not only do they have to do that, but at the end of 4 years, they have to take what's called a mechanics exam. And the mechanics exam it's a pretty tough exam, and it covers all 4 years of everything that you've learned from going through your elevator school, for lack of a better term. But then once you pass your mechanics test, you are issued a mechanics card. Once you reach a mechanic status, then the elevator company can use you to perform maintenance, do modernizations, new installation, work on escalators, anything like that. But you are not allowed to, if you are not a mechanic, do all of that stuff by yourself. So the biggest thing that you want to look at is the education, because they have to go through 4 years. And if you do not complete the 4 years, the union has rules to where they can remove you from their local if you are not dedicated enough to do the 4 years worth of school.
I would imagine that becomes increasingly important with all these legal changes,
Yes.
updates. I'm gonna.
Not only do they discuss everything that you're going to see in the field, part of NEAP is they're going to discuss codes, the updated codes every year when they come out every 3 years. They're going to discuss the biggest thing is safety. You're going to learn how to be the safest you can possibly on an elevator. The elevator trade is the most used form of transportation on the planet, and we have the least amount of accidents of any form of transportation, whether it be vehicle, plane. We move more people on a daily basis than any other form of transportation, but we also have the least amount of accidents on the planet.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Erin, I haven't come across the union versus non-union question before, but where I have had an issue come up is where clients have, done a modernization and the company that they went with uses proprietary parts. And so they're stuck in a situation where they're married to that vendor because they're the only vendor that has those parts. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, some companies work differently than others, but I know that's come up with clients that we represent.
Yeah. Steve, that's a whole nother webinar.
Yeah.
We fight that on a daily basis. We're an independent. We are not a major. We're one of the largest independents in the country.
Right.
But yes, that's a whole nother webinar on
Whole
that one.
whole can of worms, right?
Yeah,
So
it's a
round two,
big
guys,
can.
we have
So
our next class.
yeah, we'll do that next month. How about that?
That sounds like a great idea to me. There are a few questions left here in the chat. I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we will send these to the respective panelists that are on here and have them reach out to you guys directly with what those look like. I do believe, I don't know if Ashley's still on here, but I do believe you all just got a poll quiz. If you would kindly give us a rating, how we did today. That way, if there's anything in the future that we can improve on and really cover for you, we're here for you. And thank you to my panelists today. We really appreciate you guys all being here. Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, click the subscribe button now.